Hello, everyone, and welcome to Business Today Television. I am Bhavya Kaushal, and today we have with us a very special guest, Nikhil Kamath, who needs no introduction. Thank you so much, Nikhil, for joining us today.
Hi, thank you, Bhavya.
Yeah. So, Nikhil, we want to start by asking that you have been involved in so many initiatives. There's Zerodha, there's Cruhers, True Beacon, and not to miss the podcast series, which has become so wildly popular and successful. I think it will be interesting for our viewers to know that what motivates you, or how do you motivate yourself to keep doing something different at different points in time.
Um I'm a fairly restless person and I like to keep busy. I think the old adage that, like uh, a quiet mind is a bad thing kind of a thing is very true for me. I think it holds true. Uh, but outside of that, a lot of these ventures help you learn and understand a subject that you did not up until that point. And that learning curve associated with it is probably the biggest trigger I have. And that gets me to try and attempt new things ever sought.
What is your leadership mantra to keep doing the amazing things that you and your team do?
I don't think there is any such thing. I don't even consider myself a very good leader. I feel like curiosity plays a big part. I like figuring out new things or trying to figure out new things. And that is, in a way, the biggest incentive for me to attempt these things. But in terms of leadership, there's no mantra. Different things work for different people. I think the whole module of having a leader and people who follow the leader is kind of not working anymore. I think today is more a day of building consensus and not being dogmatic. That works more today than the whole leadership follower module.
Right, right. Moving on, I would like to know your thoughts on Startup 20 initiative, which has rolled out several recommendations for the global startup ecosystem, and these recommendations will be presented at the G20 summit in September. So, there are several recommendations, including like a $1 trillion funding target for the global startup ecosystem by 2030. Then there's cross listing, cross incubation. There are visa programs being rolled out for startup entrepreneurs. Then there's also a startup definitional framework which they have rolled out. So, out of all these things, which recommendation are you most excited about?
Well, the government has done under our prime minister has done an exceptional job of uh, selling the India story. Uh, if you were to talk to investors across the world, they might be critical about the geographies they hail from, but they remain sanguine when they're talking about India. Uh, People attach a certain amount of exuberance when they speak about India. Uh, I would say half because of how the story has been sold, and the other half because of the rate of growth and the demographic uh, uh, equation that persists in India today.
Right.
Uh, the thing with startup funding, at the very core, it is a factor of cost of capital, which unfortunately is significantly higher today than it was yesterday. And how well the incumbent players who are routing that money into India, I'm talking about the Ps, the venture capital funds, how their experience in India has been and what kind of returns they have achieved on the funds they've deployed. There have been some mishaps. Uh, Most venture capital PE money has not yielded a very high return over the last couple of years. So I think these things define the ecosystem and they mandate how much money will come into India. So probably the best case scenario for fresh money to come into India is inflation goes down by virtue of which people are able to lower interest rates, risk-taking appetite or risk-taking ability from these foreign nations which were directing that money into India will likely go up as a result of these events. But from a perspective and narrative standpoint, we're doing everything right, and I think the government has uh, been spot on in selling the India story in the manner that they have.
Right. Do you think this $1 trillion funding market will really help support those startups which require patient capital, especially those operating in the space tech, deep tech, or semiconductor space?
So, Bhavya, money follows returns. I do not foresee uh, a PE or a venture fund trying to invest in a certain domain just to help uh, science or IP creation in India, especially a foreign venture capital fund. They will do it by virtue of the yield they foresee they will return through that investment. That being said, a lot of the IP creation and innovation seems to be happening in the US. It's very local. It's actually a very interesting question to ask ourselves as to why so much innovation and IP creation happens in India. Sorry, happens in the US. And I think we need to replicate some of the best practices there to encourage uh, innovation happening here onshore in India as well. I think there are some low-hanging fruit there. The allocation towards research as a part of the US GDP is significantly higher than how much India allocates as part of its GDP towards research. I think that number has to go up significantly.
Okay, so Nikhil, India has already set the agenda for the global startup ecosystem in 2030, and the fact that Brazil has decided to take, like the Startup 20 forward in its presidency next year is being touted as, India's first big win. But according to you, what should be the focus areas for Brazil that now it should take into account for the global startup ecosystem in its presidency next year?
Well, very tough to say. I think to create an ecosystem where policy decisions are long term and there are no knee-jerk changes in perspective, I think is important. Outside of that, to create a more open ecosystem where there is uh, increased transparency is probably important. That would be, if I had to wager a guess, I would say that.
Right, right, absolutely. Also, funding winter is, one of the most talked about topics within the startup ecosystem in the last few months. But there are some of the stakeholders who are saying that compared to 2021, of course, there is a decline. But when we look at the numbers in 2016 or 2017 or 2018, India has been seeing a steady rise. And for example, in the first half of 2023, Indian startups raised around 3.6 billion, according to a particular report. And they say that raising these big $1 billion is not exactly winter. I want to ask, do you also subscribe to the same belief?
I believe that money follows profits, and if people who have invested make a profit, more money will follow. I also feel public markets and private markets are correlated, but public markets tend to be leading indicators because a lot of the private deal flow is looking to exit onto the public market. I think there's the issue here as well because most value is kind of squeezed out of the equation before it actually reaches the public market. But I think these factors play the biggest and probably the cardinal part in this entire ecosystem. And we need to ensure that people who have come into India do well as a return on the capital they have deployed, and we need to make sure the policies and the foresight and the expectations one has around policy in India continues to remain stable, so people can forecast for the long run. And I guess we have to hope that inflation were to drop and capital costs will come down.
Lastly, going forward, what are the things that you're really excited about in the coming times? What are the things that you're really looking forward to?
in my life, in the markets, in private venture, what in which domain?
Yeah, in the initiatives that you have rolled out. So True Beacon, Gruhas, and also the podcast series.
Yeah, so the podcast is a charity series. I felt there is a significant uh, vacuum that is being created. I think intelligent, well-read youth, especially entrepreneurs who want to start a business, there isn't much quality available for them in terms of content to consume. Uh, and when this vacuum is created, I think there is a big play to be made in content. But this particular podcast for me continues to remain a charity piece. It's somewhere where I'm trying to get the panelist, including myself, to donate money publicly to charity and allow for the audience to allocate that money. And hopefully, there is a positive feedback loop there. There is a certain kind of high one experiences when they do charity and see the impact of it. The hope there is that once they do it by virtue of the podcast, if somebody votes for cleaning the road or cleaning a beach, the next time around when they're at a beach, they're a bit skeptical of littering a bit more than they might have been otherwise. But outside of that, it's education for an entrepreneur. It's no drama. It's very focused on helping people who are looking to build a business, much like myself, understand. And it's not very preachy. It's kind of like me learning with them. So hopefully, people find value in it. In all the other ventures that I have and I spend time on, I think creating something that is meaningful, working with people who I consider friends. I think the latter more than the former. I think building and working with people who I consider friends is the most appealing thing to me.
Right, but is it difficult to bring so many people together to talk about different initiatives? These are busy people with different schedules. Did you find it challenging to bring them all together on one table and talk about so many things?
It's a hard thing to talk about, but a lot of these guys are my friends. I would say all of them are my friends, and we catch up and hang out anyway. So it wasn't hard, and people are really uh, disenfranchised, or the allure of news media or people talking about finance and economics and anything non-entertainment, the quality has dropped abysmally in our country. Like I think there needs to be something that is done there. I'm not saying I have the solution. I do a small little thing in a tiny little corner, but I think the youth of our country need access to better quality content created in our country. If this plays a small part in that, everybody who's coming on the show, I think, will be glad they did and they played a part in that story.
Right, right. Thank you so much, Nikhil, for joining us for this conversation. All the best for all your endeavors and all the best for your podcast series. Also, we are looking forward to the next episode.
I wish you the same, Bhavya. Thank you.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share, and subscribe.